Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Kylie Cast. I'm Kylie Griswold, managing editor at The Federalist. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. In fact, we have a brand new channel for the Kylie Cast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if you are just subscribed to the Federalist Radio Hour or You're Wrong with Molly Hemingway and David Harsani, two of our other great Federalist podcasts, be sure to go over and like and subscribe to the Kylie Cast as well. Leave us a 5-star review. That will really help us and make sure that you never miss an episode. And even better yet, if you're just listening to the show, go check out the full video version on my personal YouTube channel or the Federalists channel on Rumble. And then, of course, like and subscribe there too. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at radio@thefederalist.com. I would love to hear from you. Today, I'm so excited to welcome to the show Erika Anderson. She's a Christian wife and mother, and most recently, the author of Freely Sober, Rethinking Alcohol Through the Lens of Faith. This book is available now for pre-order on Amazon, and it is released on January 6th, just a few short weeks away. So don't sit on this. Definitely get a copy of this book. Today, Erika and I discuss her own story, her own struggles, also how the church can help people who struggle with this issue, and also how to approach alcohol and sobriety from a place of grace and forgiveness and empowerment rather than a place of shame. So without further ado, please welcome to the Kylie Cast, Erika Anderson. Erika Anderson, thank you so much for joining me today on the Kylie Cast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, well, back at you. Can you start by just telling our listeners a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and what led you to write this book, Freely Sober?
Yeah, definitely. I live in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm a mom of two kids, 7 and 10. So those are sort of two primary things about me, but I've been writing for many years. And, this is my third book, but a really special book for me because it really highlights some of the tough things I've been through regarding alcohol and struggles with alcohol. But I knew it was something that God was leading me to write as I was going through that. And so it's been a labor of love. It's been a personal journey of overcoming and then wanting to use what I've learned and sort of some of the wisdom and the strength that I've gained over this time. I want to share that with others because it's something I didn't have in the beginning of this. And I want to make that available to people who maybe are in the beginning stages and just don't know where to go, don't know what to do next, and really need sort of a friend to walk them through what they're going through.
Yeah, absolutely. As I was reading the book, I mean, I haven't really looked for books about this before, but as I was reading it, it struck me as something that was both deeply personal, but also something that there was definitely a need for. I've never seen a book like this before, and so you seem like the perfect person to write it. Can you just walk us through a little bit about why this book is needed? What are some of the cultural norms specifically that kind of led you down your path of struggle with alcohol?
Yeah, for sure. Well, one thing that I noticed I've been sober for over 5 years now, but it was really like 20 years leading up to me actually quitting before I got there. So when I started drinking, it was in high school, innocent enough like most people. But it immediately felt like it was a little bit of a problem for me, a little bit of an unhealthy relationship, which I can trace back to partially genetics. Some of this people are more prone to addiction than others if it's in their family. And that is true for me. But when I finally got to the point where I thought, I need to seriously think about how I could actually quit drinking, there were very few faith-based resources.
Mhm.
And there weren't even a ton of even very accessible secular resources at the time when I first started looking into this. But specifically for myself, I was like, as a Christian woman, I don't feel like I have anything that speaks directly to me.
Mm.
And so, as much as I liked every bit of Quit Lit that I read, all of the books about sobriety that are out there, I enjoyed those. They were helpful. I still felt like something was really missing. And so I knew when I got to this point that this was going to be something that really I felt like God was calling me to do. But to get back to what you were saying, women have been drinking more in the past 20 years than ever before.
Mm.
It's a big, long story, but to put it in a nutshell, alcohol marketing has played a huge part in this and how they market very specific beverages to women and then sort of upcharge them for the same things that they sell to men. It's called the pink tax. And so we have seen this massive campaign to target women with all kinds of drinking, and women have taken them up on that. And
Mhm.
because of that, we have seen alcohol related deaths in women increase by like something like 60% in the past 10 or 20 years. And it's affecting a whole generation of women almost unexpectedly, to where many women get to the point where they're like almost caught off guard by the fact that they actually have a problem, and
Mhm.
also ashamed to admit it because it feels like you're not supposed to.
Mhm.
It's like men sort of have always been the ones thought of as having a problem. If you look at movies, if you look at history, it's like women are always the ones sort of like keeping things in check and making sure the kids are in order and all of that. And so to be a woman and struggle with alcohol is hard to admit. To be a Christian woman and to be a mom, that takes it to a whole other level, because moms are shamed just to a totally more level than dads are, for whatever reason.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm sure there's so much to unpack too in the statistics about the rise in deaths of women attributed to alcohol. I mean, does that even count the number it can't probably account for the number of women who have gotten increased cancers because of alcohol. Like, I'm sure there's not even a way to quantify that, totally,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, alcohol related deaths, this is why it's not cut and dry. It's not that you can say, "Oh, well, this person drank this and so they died for
Mhm.
that reason."
Right, right.
But it's a whole host of conditions: heart disease, cancer, car wrecks, all
Mhm.
kinds of things that compound when we look at how alcohol is associated with the way our bodies work. It is associated with so many different diseases, so many autoimmune diseases. And then, when you put all of those numbers together, they have been able to tell, like, this is how it is affecting women specifically. And it does affect women's bodies in a different way than it affects men's bodies.
Mm.
Obviously, men and women are different. And the short term and long term consequences of drinking, but especially heavier drinking, is it's very prolific. You can see the difference in how it affects women just more in a more powerful way. And so that's not necessarily bad or good. It's just is what it
Mhm.
is. That's how our
Mhm.
bodies are made. And I think that's one reason you see a lot of women actually paying attention to this more. Not only are we getting educated and we're seeing how alcohol negatively affects the body, but we are much more in tune these days to what's going on with our bodies hormonally, what's
Yes.
happening reproductively. There's conversations around this more in a holistic fashion. When you think about like the Maha movement and things like that,
Mhm.
we are sort of catching up to this conversation and realizing not only is alcohol bad mentally and spiritually, it is so bad for you physically.
Right.
And so I love to see women getting educated about this and seeing so many people choosing to stop drinking alcohol, even if they didn't see it as like a, oh, I have an addiction problem. You don't have to have an addiction problem to stop drinking. You
Mhm.
just have to decide, this isn't what I want for my life anymore.
Right.
And that was part of it for me. I also was having an addiction problem, but no matter where you sit on the spectrum, there is no requirement to get to some point to say you want to quit drinking. There's so many reasons that people are doing it.
Mhm. There's also so many good alternatives now, it seems. I mean, there are go anywhere and there's a million mocktails, or go into any grocery store and there's aisles full of refrigerated drinks that are non-alcoholic that are just more interesting, or full of probiotics, prebiotics, fancy sodas, all of these things. Yeah, and once you pair that with the Maha movement, and I mean, how many women and how many influencers are their entire brand is about detoxifying your home and detoxifying your life, and you can't really detoxify your life if you continue to pour toxins into it in the form of wine, or whatever. I mean, it does no good to get rid of all of the other chemicals if you're still just completely changing the chemical balance of your body by poisoning it on the regular. So,
Right. And I
yeah.
mean, I think that's, we see this. The American Cancer Society came out 2 years ago or so and said that there is no amount of alcohol that they can say is safe. It
Mm,
literally is, as you say, it literally is a toxin. And, I don't know why it took us so long to get to that point to understand that, but it makes sense. Think of all the negative consequences that happen to our bodies when we drink it. I think common sense is just sort of catching up right now.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many people are way more aware of it too, as we see fertility rates go down, in some ways inexplicably, and other issues like that. It's like anything you can do to fix your body and fix your life. And this is one of what seems to be one of the big culprits of that. So when you said you kind of realized it right away, but is there a moment that you can point to when you realized, I have an alcohol problem?
Mm.
This is not just something I enjoy. This is something that has a power over me.
Yeah, there's been, there were moments here and there over the years. I remember one of the first times that I really felt that was after a New Year's Eve where I had gone out and really just made a complete fool of myself and really kind of blacked out. Not everyone has blackout drinking, but it's kind of a biological thing. Some people have it, don't, some people don't. I did have that. And so I had that night in particular, I did not really remember what happened. I was
Mm.
told later. I was so embarrassed. And this is, I mean, gosh, what year was this? Like a really long time, like 15 years ago or something. And I was like, I have to quit drinking. And so I quit drinking for 30 days, which I was in my 20s. So that was like really hard because my whole life was like my friends and going out.
Mhm.
But after 30 days, I couldn't go any longer. I was like, oh, this is like, I'm going to go right back to my old habits. And so I would have sort of moments like that periodically where I would do something that I was really embarrassed by
Mhm.
or feel stupid or feel out of control. And that would happen and I would start this cycle over. So I would have those moments, but I think
Mhm.
really what pushed me over the edge to really try to work on this is after becoming a mom.
Mm.
It sort of transitioned into a different way that it fit into my life. Prior to getting married and having kids, it was more like I'm kind of doing my own thing, like going out with friends or even drinking at home, but nobody else was depending on me. But
Mhm.
once you become a parent, obviously, like your whole brain sort of switches around. And so I had my second child and I was on to this sort of wine mom personality. Not that I was
Mhm.
like calling myself that, but I was drinking wine almost every day. And I
Mhm.
would get to the point where it's like, okay, I'm not going to drink tomorrow. Okay, I'm detoxing tomorrow. But
Mhm.
then come 6 o'clock, I would find myself with that familiar craving, with that like
Mhm.
triggering feeling, and then feeling almost compelled, like, I cannot stop this from happening.
Mhm.
Almost like when the thought entered my mind, I had to obey it. And so I would drink and then wake up in the middle of the night and I would get panicked with myself, panicked thinking, oh my gosh, I said I wasn't going to do it. I couldn't stop it. This is out of control. If
Mhm.
my kid woke up and needed to go to the emergency room right now, could I drive them there? So I had
Mhm.
these kind of thoughts. And those were the things that put me there. And then also just thinking, alcoholism runs in my family. I don't want my kids dealing with this. The very best thing I can do for my kids is to stop drinking.
Mhm.
And so that wasn't enough to, do it. I needed more than just one reason, but a
Mhm.
combination of factors sort of built up. And I was able to get to that point where I got curious. I started Googling things. I started being really investigative about it without quitting, but just with an open mind.
Mhm. Mhm. You write about one particular time in the book where you are putting your daughter to bed. Can you explain kind of what happened in your mind at that time?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was rocking my daughter to sleep. She was a baby. And I just remember prior to us going into her room, I had been thinking, like, bedtime is so hard. I had a toddler as well. Bedtime is so hard. It's like I never ever get my nights anymore. And
Mhm.
I want to get through this. And looking back now, I mean, I cringe to think about it because to rock my baby daughter to sleep, like now that she's 7, I'm like, oh, what I would give to be able to do that again.
Mhm.
But that night I was like, I need something to like help me through this night. And I think I think at that particular time we had something in the fridge and I like took a couple swigs or something like that. And I was in there and I was rocking her to sleep and I had this overwhelming feeling of like, what am I doing?
Mhm.
Like I'm basically buzzed right now, rocking my baby to sleep. And why? What kind of person does this? I just, really hurt, really going against myself. And then when she was asleep and I left her room, I like sort of the shame was so overpowering that I just went and drank more to get rid
Mhm.
of that feeling. And so it's this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And I just thought, this is not the person I want to be, but I feel so stuck in my patterns and stuck in the physical addiction that I've created by telling myself I need this to get through things.
Mhm. And I think you walk through some of this in your book, but can you explain what exactly happens, like, with our brain wiring or the incentive structure or whatever, where, like, why isn't that resolve enough?
Mhm.
Why can you feel horrible and decide, "This is not how I wanna live my life," and then 24 hours later be compelled to do this thing that just has seemingly complete control over you. Like, how does that work in the brain,
Mhm.
and why isn't willpower enough to get
Right.
through these things?
Well, this was really key for me in understanding and being able to overcome because for so many years, I just kept telling myself, you are weak. You are
Mm-hmm.
not trusting God enough. Like, this is a matter of discipline. This is a matter of willpower. Like, if you were just stronger, you could do this. And then when I
Using
started,
shame as a motivator, more or less.
right, pretty
Yeah.
much, which obviously pretty much doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I began to educate myself just about alcohol and just like the basics 101, I learned that, when you start giving your body an addictive substance, you teach your body that it needs that substance to get through whatever moment it is you're getting through. And
Mm-hmm.
so every night when I would have that feeling, I had basically taught my body, hey, you're going to die if you don't have this. And that sounds extreme, but
Mm-hmm.
that's the kind of like sort of panic and overwhelm your body begins to associate with it.
Right.
And
Right.
that feeling is so overwhelming. And so you don't realize you've created that. You blame yourself, but really it's a physical reaction that you can deprogram. You can deprogram it, but it feels impossible when you're
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of sort of the addiction, so to speak. And
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't mean necessarily that I was like, if I quit drinking, I'm going to have to be hospitalized or something.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't to that point, although some
Right.
people are. It was more, I guess, of a sort of mental, physical collab there.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, yeah, like once I realized, like, oh, actually, this is a physical thing that I can change, that isn't going to be like this forever. I've taught my body this. I can unteach my body this.
Mm-hmm.
That was very empowering because I was able to stop blaming myself because I finally realized that it's so much bigger than just me and my willpower.
Mhm. Yep, yep. Well, and, when you talk about this feeling of I'm gonna die if I don't have this, or I'm not gonna be able to get through this thing that I'm doing if I don't have this, liquid help. You wrote in the book about, um, more or less like coming up with errands or like kind of revolving other activities in your life around being able to get this alcohol, even if you had previously resolved, like, I'm not going to have it in the house because it'll be easier not to drink it if I don't have it, and then kind of going out of your way to get it in other ways that were more secretive or whatever. Can you talk a little bit about that too?
Yeah, so I would, as if you have a drinking issue at all, you know that you make a lot of rules and there's a lot of, ways that you moderate to try to pretend that you don't have a problem or try to make sure you don't go too far with it. And one of my rules was that I didn't just sort of keep alcohol in the house all the time because I just knew I wasn't going to be able to resist it. The
Mhm.
other rule was that I wasn't allowed to buy liquor because liquor can, if you drink liquor, I mean, obviously that can very, very quickly put you, like, spin you out into a really bad place.
Mhm.
But because I didn't keep it in the house, I always had to go get it like by the day. And so
Mhm.
that might mean I'm telling my husband, oh, I have to go pick up something from Target. Or if I'm at the store, I'm like not walking by the wine aisle. I'm definitely grabbing something. A lot of times, what I would grab is the little mini packs of wine because I could easily sort of hide them in my purse or I could put them in
Mhm.
my bathroom. And it sounds so crazy that you would hide something like that. And my husband wasn't like giving me a hard time about drinking. I just like didn't want him to know that I was
Mhm.
drinking. And
Mhm.
I wanted it was like my little thing, like my little, pot of shame. And so I did have that situation sometimes where like I was hiding it in the bathroom or I was hiding it in my car or something like that. And that obviously that told me, hey, this is like a bigger issue. Like, normal people don't do this.
Right.
And as
Right.
those kinds of moments begin to increase, I just felt like I was spiraling, and which was my motivation to step forward to try to get some help if I could.
Mhm. So, what was different about the time, all the times you kind of tried to willpower your way through it? What was different about that versus when you actually did get sober?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different things. Number
Mhm.
one, I will say for many years before I got to that point, I was praying about this. I was talking with God about it, reading scripture about it, like writing down prayers about it.
Mhm.
Even though I did not turn the corner, um, I think that faithfulness and continued sort of turning to God to say, like, hey, I want to find freedom from this.
Mm.
Please help me. I think that eventually really helped me. I think staying consistent in my dependence on Him to one day find freedom, I think that was, kind of compounded. And I eventually got to that point. The other thing was some of it's very practical. I heard someone once say, if you just do 30 days, it's kind of like white knuckling it. Anybody can do it. And then you're just like dying to get to the other side of that and you drink
Mhm.
again. They said you have to get to 90 days to really feel what any kind of freedom feels like.
Mm.
And so I was like, okay, like 90 days. I'm just going to keep my eye on 90 days.
Mhm.
And I was able to do that. And long story short, I did get sober for 6 months and I was feeling really good. I even like sort of spoke in front of my small church about it. And then COVID hit and I sort of fell backwards and went back to drinking. And at first it was fine. You know, at first you're like, oh, this is fine. I got this. But then like, you know, by the time the summer was over, I was back to all my old habits, feeling out of control again. I said, I've got to take a 30-day detox. Like that was all I could do. I felt completely out of control. And I was just like, okay, 30 days, like sober September, you know? And the difference that time around was that I joined a community, which sounds, I mean, you know, you hear the same advice over and over again. It's like, community is everything. Well, it really is everything. And so I joined a community. It was a secular community, but it was the first time I'd ever like been in a group really with a lot of people. And I saw people that looked like me. I saw people that didn't look like me at all. And the stories were all over the map. But people were coming into and this is on Zoom, but there were like hundreds of people on the meeting. People were coming to the meeting, they like spilling their hearts out, sharing some of like, you hear the most wise, most beautiful comments you'll ever hear on a recovery meeting, but it's not recorded and nobody, you know, you don't write it down. And so it felt like a sacred space. And almost like, I was like, wow, like this is just a whole different like level of life for me. And so I stuck to those meetings and I was going all the time. And at the same time, of course, like I'm continuing in my prayer life. I'm leaning on God. I'm, you know, combining all of these different elements of support to get me, I don't know, across the finish line is not the right word, but I got to 30 days. And because I was in that group, I felt really strong and I kept going and I kept going. And so then ultimately I like had my eye on a year. And of course I was like, well, what happens after a year? Like, that's like, I don't know, you know, but you know, you just keep going. And so now, of course, 5 years sober, it's such a relief to say, I hardly ever think about alcohol. And it used to be something that was constantly running in the back of my mind, very oppressive, it took up so much space in my life and my mind. And now I'm so much freer to work on other things, to pursue other goals. I mean, I feel like I just cleared out so much crap when I got rid of that after so many years of having it just play over and over and over again and keep me down.
Well, and I think that's probably such a good parallel to so many other things that we struggle with. Other, you know, however you want to classify alcohol addiction, but like other sins that have a hold on us or other, you know, compulsions that do. And it can be anything. I mean, whether it's like a pornography habit or gambling or even just gossiping or like anger or things like that. You know, when you recognize this in your heart and in your life, it's great to spend time in the word and to spend time with the Lord and journal about it and confess it and pray. And like, those are all good and necessary things, but it can be really hard to find freedom until you surround yourself with a community where you are identifying yourself as struggling with this thing and either realizing that you're not alone, because then you're not stuck in this just shame corner where you're unwilling to confess this problem, but also finding accountability and community and all of those things. And you know what, a lie from the enemy to just keep us stuck in shame and unwilling to surround ourselves with people who struggle with the same issues. I mean, it's just, he can keep us there so long, and just the freedom that we can find when we finally step out and say, no, I'm gonna find other people who struggle with this, or maybe they don't, but I just need accountability and community to surround me while I kind of uproot this thing that's got a hold on me.
Yeah, and you also don't, you know, you get so much wisdom from other people who have been there, who are in the middle of it. You know, you begin to realize, you know, I think part of it also is beginning to realize that failure, or whatever you would term failure, it doesn't have to be what you might have previously thought it was when you're kind of walking the road alone. Like you don't have the perspective of other people coming to me like, actually, like, let's think about the fact that yes, you drank this day, but you also didn't drink 29 other days of the month. And that is way more important. You know, that was another one. I was encouraged by people in the group say, you know what, if you drink one day, like, let's look at, these are data points. We're being curious. We're just going to look at this and say, oh, what happened? Like, let's instead of shaming ourselves, get curious about why we're doing things so that next time we can be aware of that. It's really more about asking a lot of questions. You got to have a lot of grace for yourself. And that's a good thing in this situation. You just have to, because if you walk into these things shaming yourself, full of self-criticism, like that is going to keep you stuck instead of letting you feel free and able to make a decision based on new information, based on the kind of life you actually want to have. You can't make healthy choices when you're making them from a position of shame.
Right, right. And as Christians, making choices from a position of shame is not the status of the believer. Like that is not a gospel informed way of living or thinking. You know, we have been freed from these things. We are no longer slaves to sin. You know, we do have power through Christ. And so, you know, not that we can just like pray our struggles away, but we also have a supernatural power and forgiveness and grace. And it's like if the Lord is giving us those things, then we also need to accept those things and live as if they're true, and not just be resorting to shame.
Yeah, yeah. One of the most powerful things and realizations to me was recognizing that that even if I continued drinking, if I never really got over this thing here on earth, like that I wasn't going to lose my salvation, I wasn't going to be loved by God any less. Now, when we walk in, the will that God has for us, like life is going to be more peaceful, life is
Mhm.
going to be better. But even if I weren't ever to get to that point, like I didn't have to worry about losing love or salvation.
Mhm.
And that seems to me almost like, well, yeah, Erica, you should know that as a Christian. But sometimes you don't realize like the hold that some of those lies have on your mind.
Mhm.
But once I realized that, and I was like, and it was just sort of like, oh, like you can be sober. You don't have to be sober. But you know what I mean? Like it was
Mhm.
just like a mindset shift of have to versus choosing to. And that's
Mhm.
really the whole reason I named the book Freely Sober,
Mhm.
was that you can choose that and you can do that without feeling compelled, without feeling like it's a requirement as a Christian or as, the person that you want to be. And weirdly enough, that frees you up to be able to make better choices.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I really love the title of the book, and that's a really beautiful, beautiful image. So, changing gears a little bit, I'm curious, what was it like, you know, going to a meeting or maybe even like admitting this to some fellow women in your church or whatever? That's a really tough step. I'm curious what it was like, um, admitting this to your husband.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting with my husband because he actually grew up with in a very alcoholic household. To like, the kind of like the stereotypical type of thing where he was really very neglected as a child. His mom had severe alcohol and drug problems. So when I would come to him and say, I feel like I have this drinking issue, he'd be like, "You're fine." For him, it didn't look like what he had dealt with in his life.
Right, right.
It was definitely a different level. And so for him, he's supportive of me quitting drinking or not, but he wasn't telling me, "Oh, you've got to quit drinking." But also, when I drank, he would drink, and there were lots of fights when that would happen.
Mhm.
He does not have a good relationship with alcohol either. And so I knew, if nothing else, that me quitting was going to be really good for our family and our household because of the way that we interacted when both of us were drinking. So that's something.
Mhm.
But initially, a really huge first step for me was sharing with my Bible study small group, like, "Hey, I'm struggling with this," and it was really hard. I remember I was so uncomfortable. I was like sitting on the couch, and I was like, "Well," I was looking down. I felt stupid. I don't know why. I don't know why I felt so timid to share. Like, as someone that's been in small groups, my entire adult life, and prayed many times with lots of people, been on mission trips. For whatever reason, like sharing this was so hard, and it felt like
Mhm.
I was coming from such a dark place. But once I put it out there, that honestly was the beginning of healing. I mean, this was
Mhm.
probably a year before I actually was able to have any sort of extended period of sobriety. But it really was like bringing it out of the darkness and putting it into the light.
Yep.
And, we all know that shame dies in the light, and it cannot grow when there is light around it. And
Mhm.
so when I took that step to put it out there into the light, that it only got easier from there to continue telling people.
Mhm.
And as I walked into my sobriety journey, and like I was very kind of like testing it out online, and when I was sharing, I'm a pretty open person online. Like I've always had a blog, I've always put myself out there, but I would sort of say little things about like, yeah, I kind of feel like, it's kind of gone overboard in culture. Like, I would just make little comments just to sort of see like, what are people saying? How are
Mhm.
people responding? Until I got to the point where I started being a lot more vocal about it. And I was like, I'm quitting drinking and I'm getting sober. And that helped me identify as someone who didn't drink. Like I use that as a power thing in my journey. Not everyone's going to do this. There are people that are 10 years sober that still don't want to talk about it. I just felt called. I felt like, hey, I'm going to go first. If more people were honest about this, if more people were open about this, then less people would hide it and think that it was something they needed to be ashamed of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you noticed in your personal life, or maybe even in your online, correspondence with people as well, but have you noticed other people who have come forward because of your story who are like, I didn't know I had a problem, but then I read about your story and I realized I do. Has there been any of that kind of response?
I wouldn't say it's not necessarily people who are like, I didn't know I had a problem. It's mostly people that are like, I really haven't met anyone that's like me. This
Mm.
that sort of fits this, especially the faith part. Like I've heard from like pastors' wives and like people that are like Sunday school teachers and just like Christian homeschool moms. Like I hear from a lot of people like that, the people that you would never look at and think that they had a problem. They're sort of hiding their problem like I
Mhm.
was. Those are the kind of people that I hear from the most that just
Mhm.
say, thank you. I really resonate with this. I really want to overcome this. Like I've also had people message me. Many people have messaged me. They'll say, hey, I just want to let you know, like I just celebrated a year of sobriety and you were really influential in like getting me there. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what? I didn't even know. I had no idea. And yet they're telling me like the stuff that I was posting was very motivating and inspiring to them. And I'm sure there's plenty of people that I just never say anything. But because of that, it's just like, okay, like this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
And also, I'm sure there are people out there that are going, oh, like maybe I do have a problem. Like that's the other thing. Like there are people that I say that people, and I did this to myself, gaslight themselves. People
Mhm.
gaslight themselves into thinking they don't have a problem. They'll be like, well, I don't. Surely I don't. I mean, that's normal, right? Like, I mean, it's fine. Everybody does this.
Mhm.
I did that over and over and over again, but it's like, if you're doing that, if you think it's a problem for you, if in any way it feels like a problem, it is a problem. If it wasn't a
Mhm.
problem, you wouldn't be thinking about it.
Right,
So
right. Like, what kinds of things do people rationalize?
I mean, rationalize just like, oh, it's 5 o'clock. Like everybody drinks after work and like to relax, or, oh, like it's been such a long day. Like I cannot deal with the witching hour with these kids. I just need something to help me get through it. Or it's the weekend, or it's a holiday, or whatever it is. Like I remember something I used to do. A friend of mine said, oh yeah, my workout instructor, she like drinks like 2 bottles of wine a night and she's like in such good shape and she just loves drinking. And I was like, well, I mean, this girl like is drinking 2 bottles of wine a night and she's teaching fitness classes. So like it's totally fine if I'm drinking, a half a bottle to a whole bottle a night
Right.
because and if I can get up and I can work out in the morning and I can, get through my day, go to work and do all the things I'm supposed to do, well, I can't have a problem, right? Because I'm not staying at home all day and like being worthless. So anything you can come up with to justify it, and the world will happily go along with that because
Mhm.
other people don't want to give up drinking either. And so they don't want
Mhm.
to tell you to give up drinking because that would
Mhm.
mean they have to question themselves.
Mhm. I'm curious in your research. So we've talked a little bit about like the gender nature of these things, partly because of the marketing to women and how that's really changed women's alcohol consumption habits. But what have you learned in your research about just the nature of addiction between men and women, or how problems with alcohol might manifest differently in men and women?
Well, one of the most interesting things I found, which is that women in high power positions like surgeon or a lawyer, those kind of jobs, like you will see the numbers show that women have higher rates of addiction than men. And so I don't know exactly what that means, but I
Mhm.
do think that like maybe women internalize some of their stress more. They're sort of trying to hold it together in a way that men are not.
Mm.
A lot of times, women. I mean, I'm not. I am definitely not one to be hating on men at all. But
Mhm.
I do think that women, especially those who are moms working in high power position, they are balancing more sometimes than men are,
Mhm.
just like more mentally. And
Mhm.
so I think that could be part of it. I also think just the way our bodies imbibe this stuff, like the way that the way it creates more of that physical addiction side of it, what we're using to cope. We have different outlets. And so that's, I just think, a vulnerability of women to sort of go to that when everything sort of feels out of control and they want to put on, making it look like everything's okay when it's not.
Hmm. That would also make sense with the percentage rise. When did you say, can you give the statistic again about how much um,
The
alcohol
alcohol related
consumption?
deaths.
Yeah.
Oh,
And how, over what time frame?
yeah, let's see. It's 2025. So it was actually probably more than 20 years ago when
Hmm.
the alcohol marketing really stepped up its
Hmm.
game. It's like it started with, wine coolers and things like that. But then you started seeing all these different like marshmallow flavored vodka and,
Hmm.
the skinny margarita.
Yes.
As soon as the marketing industry saw, oh my gosh, women they want to pay for this just as much as men, like, or not, if not more. I mean, it just kind of exploded. And then you saw advertising like all about how alcohol is like empowering, or it's, you can be just like the guys, or you deserve it. And all of this stuff just sort of exploded. And you watch alcoholism and struggles with alcohol and alcohol related deaths explode at the
Hmm.
same rate if you looked at a
Hmm.
chart. Now you can't blame necessarily alcohol marketing for everything. Like we
Hmm.
have to take some responsibility for our actions. But I do think it was happening sort of low key. People weren't realizing the shift, and now we do realize that, and now we
Hmm.
can take responsibility. One of the things I know, one particular drink that people have struggled with a lot is like the White Claw or the Trulies. Like I
Hmm.
hear about that all the time, and I was certainly that was for me too, because you're like, oh, this has like no calories in it and whatever.
Right.
But those kinds of drinks, with this focus on like the low calorie and the sweetness and all of that, but yet
Yes.
still strong, those really have hooked people in a bad way.
Yes. And not that, wine mom culture isn't real because of course that's a huge problem, but I think probably a lot of it too is not just that these people are moms, it's that they're moms who are also doing a lot of other things. Very much the feminist lean in culture where you're not talking about women who, are just not I don't mean to belittle this at all. I mean, but they're not stay-at-home moms. Like that is not their sole responsibility. They're stay-at-home moms who are also freelancing, or they're also working a full-time job and taking care of the kids, or all these other things. And it's like, you know, how do you manage all of these things that women were never supposed to manage? And so that's just another way to justify, having something to cope with these things. And
It's so true. And you hear, I think it's probably less common now. People are becoming a lot more sort of aware that like, hey, telling someone to have a glass of wine maybe isn't like sort of PC anymore. But it's interesting to look back at history and see like I think there was like sort of two periods of history when this was most popular, but definitely like back in like, I want to say 40s, 50s, like women were often given these not, I don't know if it was prescription, but like these drugs to sort of help them chill out. Laudanum, I think, is what it was called.
okay.
It was like, oh, they're nervous, like they need to have this, and so they would take this medicine that sort of had them like zombieing around, and that was a lot of women that actually were bored and didn't
Mm,
have a lot of purpose in their lives. And I think now we're sort of at the other extreme. I think you make a great point that many of the people that struggle in the same position as me are women that are trying to do so many things. And
mhm,
so it's like we need to find the balance. Like we are trying to do too much, but we also need to have a purpose. And so where is finding that healthy balance, and how do we create that in families and create that in society? And part of that's like personal choices and intentionality and just even understanding and being aware of this. And part of it's just um, just being aware.
mhm. You talk in the book a little bit about there being a grief associated with giving up alcohol, or a loss. Can you explain what you mean by that and why maybe that can be an inhibitor to people taking the step to give it up?
Yeah, I mean, I think people, you as a drinker or somebody that's drinking, you might think like, well, not everything was bad. It's not like every time I drank, it was like a total catastrophe. Like you think of all the fun times that you had, like maybe vacations you went on, weddings you went to, concerts
Mhm,
you attended. Like there's a lot of really good memories, and so many good things in your life cross over. And we have sort of integrated alcohol into all the celebratory and good things that we do. And so it's like, well, how can I ever let go of those things? Like I'll never have fun again. But the reality is that we are we never separated the two. And so we think that the alcohol was the thing that made it so great. And it
mm,
wasn't necessarily true. But to speak to the grief side of it, like, it's okay to grieve the fact that you're losing something that sometimes was a comfort, and sometimes that something that was a friend to you at times, something that you
Mhm.
felt enhanced your life at times. Like, it's okay to be like, I'm going to miss that, or like, that's too bad. But also recognize that this is, it's not the same as it used to be. You're a different stage in life. You can make different choices. And it's interesting because one of the things, for me, and I think a lot of other people, is when drinking, you're often trying to recreate like the feelings of these other situations.
Mhm.
And you really can't do that. You
Right.
can't be like, this was like the best night of my life and it was so much fun and I want to feel like that again. Like, you can't make that happen again by like drinking and hoping to get there.
Right.
And there's a lot of disappointment and like sadness that when you try to do that.
Mhm.
And so also just recognizing that those times have been and they're not going to be again. And you're going to make new
Mhm.
memories and you're going to have new joys in your life. But, just allowing yourself to be like, I'm sad that this is something I have to let go of. I'm sad I'm not a normie drinker and this is something that I even think about or that I have emotions about.
Mhm.
And just allowing yourself to feel what you feel. I mean, it's just like basic psychology. Like, we have to allow ourselves to feel our feelings, to process them, to be honest about them, to get mad about them, but then to be rational about it and recognize, okay, we can make a different decision and we can do what we know is best moving forward.
Yes, yes. You talk in the book about kind of a balance between spiritual help and spiritual disciplines, and then more, for lack of a better word, like secular or traditional treatments that people
Mhm.
pursue. How has your thinking evolved on that, and what do you think about using these two things together?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many great secular tools out there, the way people think about it, going to AA, going to support groups, maybe like using sober apps, talking things through, um, just all of the, normal things that you would think of in terms of addiction recovery. But I think you're going, at the end of the day, if you are a believer, at the end of the day, you're going to feel like those things are lacking if you're not bringing in faith-based practices as
Mhm.
well. If you're trying to wing this or you're trying to walk through this without also relying on scriptures, without also going back to God in prayer, without also recognizing the promises of God in your life every single day, and talking with mentors or friends who are also believers that can encourage you. Like, you can get sober without that for sure. But
Mhm.
as a Christian, you're going to feel like something is lacking. And I would even argue you may feel something is lacking if you're not a Christian, because ultimately, um, the reason that we drink and we're always looking for a feeling, and I think that feeling is always that we're looking for God. We're looking
Mm.
for this feeling, this like almost like heaven on earth that doesn't exist. And I think part of getting sober for me has been accepting that, like, it's never going to feel perfect here on earth, and like we're always going to have our struggles. But we are visitors on this planet and we were not made for this world, and nothing is going to feel 100% perfect until we get to heaven. But in
Mhm.
the meantime, um, the best we can do, the closest we can get, is being in the presence of God and in the presence of community with fellow believers in the church, and just using all those tools he's given us are going to get us that much closer. And
Mhm.
so I think you got to use it all.
Mhm.
You're going to it's going to feel better the more tools that you implement. And it's going to maybe depend on your personality, what works best for you. But I think both of those things are super important.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Amen to all of that. I feel like we should just wrap it right there. It's such good stuff. Um, on that note, what can churches do to help men and women who are struggling with this?
Yeah, so I feel like I need to do some kind of a bigger campaign about this, because I keep saying it, but I haven't exactly gotten to the point where I know how to get this across to everyone. But I just want more opportunities. I want it to be acknowledged. I want it to be like a known thing in the church. Like, hey, let's look at the stats. If 5 out of 100 women struggle with alcohol, or however many men as well,
Mhm.
you can bet that that probably translates into the pews as well.
Mm.
So you can know, if you have a church of 200 people, that you have, say, 10 people that may struggle with alcohol, 10 women that may struggle with alcohol. And because you know that, how can you be speaking to that? Not that you're
Mhm.
necessarily directly calling it out, but you are maybe incorporating that into commentary in the sermon. Maybe you're offering an opportunity like, hey, if you're struggling with this, like, we have someone that can talk with you about this, giving people an opportunity, because they're not going to just come to you and talk about it. Like, nobody's going to be like, maybe I'll just go tell my pastor that I have a drinking problem. When I spoke in front of my church, there was one woman who, I didn't even know her, but she sent me a message. She was like, hey, can I talk to you about what you talked about on Sunday? And we had coffee, and, that was 5-6 years ago, and we're still friends. But she would have never, ever told me or anyone else had I not gone up there and gone first.
Right. Right.
So I think I just want churches to acknowledge it, and not just this. I mean, there are other things that they should also be acknowledging, but giving people an opportunity. Hey, it's not weird to struggle with this. Like, we do not judge you. We want to support you. If that's happening, like, hey, we're going to have a session after church, or drop your name in this bucket and we'll give you a call and pray with you. So that, and also to have a resource library, I think, is the other thing. It's like, when somebody comes to you with a problem, you want to have something to give them. You want to have some direction. So being, I think, also just informed about how you can help people, not just being like, well, there's an AA meeting down the road.
Right.
Like, your church should be like a wellspring of resources and places where you can find comfort and help and direction. And so I think all ministry teams need to have that top of mind, because so many people are struggling with an addiction, whether it's this or something else.
Yes. Yes. What advice do you have for maybe fellow believers, fellow women who don't struggle with alcohol? And I would love your thoughts on, like, is there a way for them to enjoy their freedom in that as Christians without tempting their fellow believers, or without causing, a compromise for them or hurting other people who struggle? How do we find that balance of, if you do want to have a glass of wine with your book club, or if you are someone who can have a glass of wine once a week with dinner or something, how do you practice that freedom without compromising someone else, or without causing them to stumble or sin or just be hurt by that?
Yeah. I would just say being very aware. I mean, hearing this conversation, hopefully that brings awareness, but just not that you can, I would never say like you can't ever drink, because you're right, there is freedom in making that choice. But number one, like, being honest with yourself about your relationship with alcohol. If you feel like you've been pushing something off, like, just be honest about it and try to get to the bottom of it. But if you really are like, I don't have any issue with it, and I'm going to have one glass or whatever, I think just being knowing when you're going into situations that there are people that might be struggling. So I would in no circumstance ever have alcohol at a church event, for one thing. If I were, hosting an event with people from church that weren't and it wasn't necessarily a church sponsored thing, I probably still wouldn't have it, because you just don't know who could be struggling. And if you decide to serve alcohol or whatever, just being very, not that necessarily someone's going to tell you, but maybe praying about it, just being like, hey, like, let my heart and my spirit be open to what the Holy Spirit is telling me. Like, if this isn't wise, let me know. But if you're drinking wine at dinner once a week or twice a week or whatever, like, that's fine. That's your thing. For me, it doesn't bother me at all when people drink. I am around it regularly. I've never expected anyone not to drink. My concern is really just for the people that are sort of still in the midst of the struggle, trying to quit, trying to figure it out. And again, we just never know who those are. So being aware and asking God to guide you in wisdom in that, I think, is really probably the number one thing. And not over worrying, not being legalistic about it, but just awareness.
So I'm going to wrap up here, but I want the final thing. I just would love to know practical tips. You offer some really helpful stuff at the very end of your book. You also talk about the wine witch in your book. So I just want to know, like, how do you practically beat the wine witch? What are good disciplines that you have adopted that you have found to be super helpful in your sobriety journey? And maybe tools specifically to help moms with little kids who feel like they are in the thick of it, that they can't get through bedtime. What are your top practical tips?
Yeah, I would just say, like, the beginning stages are always the hardest. The first few days, the first week, it feels like, how could I ever continue doing this? So my first word of encouragement is just like, it gets easier. I've never heard a person that got sober that didn't say that. And so you just have to know, kind of walk on faith in the past experiences of people, and in the truth that that God has something better for you, that this is going to get easier if you can get through these beginning stages. So that's that's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
The wine witch, yeah, that's a tough one, and it does hit. Even if you don't have kids, sometimes that 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock hour, it's just like a long day, and you're just like, I just want to relax. But believe it or not, some of that is habit. Some of that is like you're just doing it, you're going to it. But like, could you transition that somehow to be a different habit? Like sometimes for me, like literally just like taking deep breaths, or like I have like a neck massager like thing that I use.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes just like doing those things, like it's just the stopping. It's just the like action of giving yourself a minute that is
Mm-hmm.
actually more relaxing than the drink itself. But again, you're associating it with the drink, so you think it's the drink. And that's the case with so many things. So I would
Right.
say like, what are some substitutes? Whether it's like, I let myself buy really expensive mocktails and things when I first quit drinking. So I'm like, well,
Mm-hmm.
that's fun, you know, get some of that.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely let myself eat more sweets at that time, but I don't know if that's the right decision for everybody. But like, what are some other habits that you can pick up? And it may feel, I will fully admit, like sometimes you're like, that's not going to do it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But here's an interesting thing. When we've been filling our bodies and our minds with like this superficial high of drinking, it has made it really difficult to experience the natural highs of other things.
Mm.
So it may take a while for your body to sort of get off that loop of superficial
Sure.
highs. But once you do, the normal things that are supposed to relax you will begin to actually relax you.
Right. Right.
Because it's like, if you're used to, if you like having the hottest salsa in the world, like, you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to be satisfied by the mild salsa.
Right.
But if you stop eating the hot salsa and then you sort of transition down, eventually that hot salsa will be like way overwhelming and like you can't even handle it. And that's how
Right.
alcohol will be too. It's kind of like when you get rid of sugar, people that get rid of sugar from their diet, they're like, oh my gosh, like everything is so sweet now that I've gotten rid of sugar. So anyway, that's all like physiological, and
Yes.
that's all things that happen, but it does take time. It's not going to be overnight. So I would say developing those new habits, swapping things out, having a list of things that you do before you let yourself drink is another one.
Okay.
So the idea of like, you're like, if you feel like, oh my God, I have to drink, like,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm going to do these, I can drink, but I first have to do these 10 things, which is like, could be something like step outside, take 10 deep breaths, like, drink a glass of water, splash your face with cold water. Once you get to the end of those 10 steps, that triggering feeling will probably be gone.
Mm.
And you don't tell yourself that's why you're doing it. You kind of have to trick your mind. But the reality is that moment of compulsion, that is temporary.
Right.
And if you can bypass it, you're going to say, oh, I'm so glad I didn't drink.
Right.
And so you've got to build in these tools into your life that help you overcome those moments. And then you know that you can do it. And then it gets easier the next day when you do it again.
Right. Right. Erica, you have so many great resources aside from this book, which everyone should get a copy of this book. It is out January 6th, right?
Yes.
Okay, January 6th. So perfect book to pick up in the new year. New year, new you. Great new resource. But aside from reading the book, Erica, where else can people find you? And I believe you have another online resource. Where can people find that?
Oh, yeah. So I have sobrietycurious.com. Sobrietycurious.com. You can go and get my 10 steps to sobriety for Christian women. It's basically just a toolkit with book recommendations, podcast recommendations, some articles, just some stuff to get you started and sort of just, walk into it with your curiosity. But otherwise, you can find me on Instagram, Erica_Anderson. Same thing on TikTok, pretty much everywhere. It's ErikaAndersen. And if you Google me, you'll find me all over the internet. So I would love to hear from you too. Like if you're the person that is like, oh, I've never told anyone, or I'm struggling, like definitely shoot me a DM. I'm always here for that kind of thing. And if I can be the first person that you reach out to, I would love to be. Somebody was that first person for me, and I've been thankful for them for many years. So
awesome. Erica, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your story. I can't wait for more people to read this book. It's truly excellent. I really hope everyone reads it. So thanks so much for being here today. And I hope to have you back on the Kylie Cast at some point in the future.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Kylie Cast. If you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review. Next week is Christmas, so I will not be back next week with more, and the week after that is New Year's. But I will be back soon. So until then, just remember, the truth hurts, but it won't kill you.